I'm Richard Taylor. It's the 3rd of October 2017. I'm here at Chesterton Community College in Cambridge for a private workshop event being run by the Greater Cambridge Partnership. That's the City Deal organisation, the organisation which is spending the City Deal investment in Cambridge. And this is a meeting tonight that's about the proposals for new trees on Milton Road. Now, I think that these kind of discussions, a presentation that we're expecting to have tonight, possibly from City Council officers or from other officers about the trees, should take place in public, and the deliberation between our councillors and representatives of local bodies, for example schools, should be taking place in public. But I've accepted an invitation to tonight's behind closed doors meeting so that I can report on what's going on and bring at least a little bit more transparency to what's happening, as well as to be able to contribute myself as a resident of Milton Road. So that's signing in, people being asked their names to go in, because it's of course a private behind closed doors meeting. It's not open to the public.
So once again, thanks for coming to the workshop tonight, where we're going to talk about trees on Milton Road and landscaping areas. Firstly, I'm not going to say very much. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction because we have a lot to get through tonight. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Dinah from Cambridge City Council, who's a landscape architect, and also Kenny, who is, I'm not even going to say the word.
Tree officer.
So Dinah and Kenny will provide a presentation which will set the scene for the first task, which is about trees. I'd also like to introduce Kieran Perkins from Fit Studio, who will be leading on the second task, talking more about landscaping areas on Milton Road. Also we've got Neil from WSP, and you may have not met Livio Martelli, who's the new engineer who's going to be working on the next design phase of Milton Road. So glad to have you on the project to the video. Finally, thanks again to Steve and his team for facilitating the evening. So we'll start with the presentation from Dinah, which will take about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll move on to task one. We'll have a quick roundup of task one at about 6:55. Right. For about 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to task two, and we'll aim to finish around about 8. We're starting a little bit late, so 5:08 maybe. We'll round up task two. First of all, Charles just asked to have a 1-minute slot that he agreed with Jocelyn, who's the chair of the LAF. So over to you quickly, Charles.
Thank you very much. As chair of the LAF, I'm often asked to express our continuing concern about the relationship between the length of bus lanes and all the good things we're talking about tonight. How many trees we can get in, how much greenery we can get in. Now, Paul's explained very clearly why we can't resolve the bus lane lengths at this stage, but it remains a constant concern of ours. The bus lanes that aren't needed, we all know they're not going to achieve the mighty modal shift, but the bits that really aren't needed are simply eating what could be green space. So that's the first thing I want to say. And the second is that we have a general feeling of the sort of trees we're looking for before you start telling us the lovely ones that might do it. We want ones that ideally flower in the spring and have lovely leaves in the autumn, that are hardy enough to stand up to drought and gritting and wind with damage, minor damage, and don't drop branches. So it's not asking for very much, is it? Less than a minute.
Anyway, I'll hand over now to Dinah and Kenny, who set out a lot of information on trees, what you have to take into account, and then Neil will explain the task in a little bit more detail.
Can you all hear me? Try and push my voice as much as now louder. Louder? Yes. I'll try and shout.
I'm sorry, but the microphone doesn't seem to work in this room anymore, so we've tried, but we can't get it working.
Kenny and I have been asked to come and make a presentation to you on what trees we think might be suitable, and to get the discussion further along regarding trees. As you know, the proposal is to insert a bus lane and improve the cycling and walking along the road. This means that the road is reconfigured. And currently the design is indicative, but we believe that with the right engineering solutions, there may be opportunity to improve the planting conditions and replace the existing trees, many of which are in not very good condition at the current time. This presentation takes you through our train of thought, if you like, and taking into consideration all the constraints and all the wishes and anything else that we have deliberated over the last few weeks about the trees that could go back into Milton Road. Okay, so there's the opportunity. We hope we can get improved planting conditions and replace the existing trees. The process that we went through was, first of all, we identified the current trees and the planting issues, identified the tree types that might suit the character of Milton Road, that's aesthetic and practical. Then we clarified the improved planting conditions that we might be achieved when the road is reconfigured. And then we identified a new approach to planting trees on Milton Road and the possible types that would thrive under the new conditions. To take the first one, to identify the current trees and the planting issues, Kenny's going to take you through that. I mean, Kenny knows all the trees in Cambridge personally, so I'll ask him to take you through this.
Okay, so basically, so in 2009, we obviously did a scheme of planting cherries. We chose an upright form of cherry, which is Prunus pandora, and also another flowering tree, which was Robinia cascarouge, which is the cultivar of the Robinia. So that was nearly 10 years ago. Now we just basically planted with what we had in the ground, and as you all know, Milton Road has got quite a lot of pressures, and when I landed on the street with the lads and planted or helped them plant, the ground conditions were pretty poor. Also, the room in which we had to plant the trees was very, very small. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of room for root growth. The other issue as well was that, as you can see, some of the older trees, they've been tarmacked right up to the bottom. There's no porous surface. The rain can't get into the roots. There's no air either. So yeah, obviously all of the above impacts the health of the tree, quite obviously. Now, these were the problems with the two trees that we principally put down the street. The cherry, the Prunus pandora, couldn't really deal with the reflective heat of the tarmac and surfaces. We find that quite a lot with cherries. They're quite a delicate tree. They can't deal very well with closed surfaces and kind of pedestrian on zones. The other cultivar, or the other tree, sorry, the Robinia cascarouge, you can see, as soon as we planted them, we started to get reports of vandalism. So I run down there literally and find that actually just a heavy rainstorm, the branches just come out. So they weren't a good selection. So I've been managing those trees as best I can for the last 8 or 9 years, and I've had to replace a lot. In fact, I've stopped replacing the cascarouge because every time I plant them, they just literally fall apart. The other thing is as well, is because of the poor situation the trees are currently growing in, they're just not getting to their optimum size. So yeah, that's some of the main problems. Over the years, Milton Road has well, I think there were some original pictures we were looking at earlier, has grown and cycle paths have been put in, trenching contractors have gone through, and they've literally pulled apart the street quite considerably. The other thing I wanted to say was there's a cherry Kanzan, which I think was probably one of the original plantings. When we went through and planted in 2009, we tried to keep as many of the old cherries as we could. But as you can see, there's a bus lane here, and this tree gets regularly battered by high-side vehicles. This is ideally along the lines of what I would like to see down Milton Road. That kind of size, that kind of impact. It's not as busy road as Milton Road. It's not as wide a road as Milton Road, but this does actually see a lot of traffic from the school down the end, so there are some really busy periods. But there doesn't seem to be, for some reason, which is a good thing, any banking on the verges, so the trees have got some quite nice growing spaces. So yeah, hopefully, if we get this right, Dinah will explain more in a second about what kind of systems we can put under the ground so we can have this kind of thing in Milton Road.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Those are presumably birches. Can you tell us which birches they are?
Straight up Betula pendula, they are bog standard birch. I'm not wanting to get too into detail of this section, it was just to give you an idea of what we want to do. So that's Metcalfe Road, that literally is just over there, it's not far away.
It's just that there are 3 birches on my list here, and I wanted to consider it to one.
I know, well yeah, obviously a birch cultivar will look pretty similar.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next set of slides shows you what considerations we've thought about in terms of the aesthetics and in terms of the practical constraints that we might come across when we want to plant new street trees, particularly at Milton Road. So starting with the aesthetic considerations, we thought about what tree form we would need, what would be the ultimate height that would be ideal, the ultimate canopy width, what visual interest that we were trying to create, and looking at the detail of that, the leaf size, leaf shape, leaf colour in spring and also in autumn, whether it should be flowering or non-flowering, whether it should be evergreen or deciduous. We then went on to the practical considerations, of which there are many. The most important is the available space, the presence of utilities in the ground, climate change and pest and diseases. And then we went on to think about the robustness and vigour of particular types of trees, the resilience to climate change, which means drought and heavy rain, resilience to reflective heat, as Kenny was just saying, consideration of property access and sightlines, light obstruction, property shading, excessive leaf litter, excessive fruit fall, and of course allergies to pollen. This is one of the most important things that we've got to think about on Milton Road is space. So how much space will be available above ground for maturing tree trunks, which will get fatter and wider, and maturing branches and canopies. And then space below ground for an expanding root system. I've put that line drawing in as a matter of interest. That tree, well, the line drawing itself is a pretty good, accurate depiction of what a tree will do in an open ground situation. Say if that's an oak tree, the roots of the oak tree will get out far beyond the canopy edge. But obviously in an urban situation, the root system will be far more confined, and at the moment it's confined to a very small tree pit. And that's what we're trying to improve with the new configuration. Okay, utilities. We're going to have numerous drainage and other utilities present competing for root space on the ground. I don't think it's quite that bad, but I don't know, it might be. And we don't quite have all that information at the moment. We've got to think about all the pest diseases and sensitivities and things like that. So we've got to avoid species of genus of the tree, obviously, that, like the horse chestnut, the leaf miner moth, the chillara, sensitive to sensitivities to drought, which obviously we do appreciate.
Just to add, ash is a fantastic tree and especially grows in this area of the country. However, at the moment there is a government ban on buying or planting ash trees due to Shillara. So it is a significant issue. And also, going back to the lovely horse chestnut, there are actually 5 different pathogens that are attacking that particular tree at the moment, or their cultivars. So we do have to think very carefully about what trees will survive, the longevity, you know, of what we're trying to achieve here.
Right, what planting conditions might be achieved? And we're hoping for betterment than what the situation at the moment. We've got some very clever modern ways of finding and creating more root zone underneath the hard paving. I've got 3 examples for you. This is a raft system, which is rather like a mattress. It's full of what they call urban soil, which are load bearing. You lay it across the top of the root system, but below the paving, and it allows cars to pass over the top, cycles, paving, whatever, and it won't sink and won't compress the root system. Whoops, too far. Okay. No, stay there. Do it slowly. It's not very good. That's it. Right, this is a load-bearing soil, and these come in various forms, from rocks, just like this, and trees do grow in this, all the way down to a very, very sandy load-bearing soil. It's quite commonly used now. You can put hard paving over the top, run cars over it, etc. And it's very useful when you're in a tight urban situation. And then the third example we've got is a root cell system, which is rather like building milk crates up and loading it with soil, the roots grow in that, and all 3 of these systems allow utilities to move through the root system and below the tree itself. So, yeah.
What was my notes disappeared and I didn't have time to look. Just to say, when I actually planted the trees that are slowly dying in 2009, the ground is so compacted and contaminated with goodness knows what, years of salt, possibly oils and things like that, that when we were digging the holes, some of the smells that were coming out of those holes in that verge were pretty nasty. Having said that, I dug and planted a whiteling just literally around the corner in the tree pit, and that was the same, and yet that tree's growing. So, but with obviously these sort of systems, we can literally, you know, get whole loads of new medium in the ground, and hopefully that will give it optimum growing medium.
Okay, to move on. Yes, we've had to find a new approach to tree planting in general because of climate change, because of just the situation has changed, the world has changed, we've got more pests and diseases, we've got more extremes of weather, and it will get worse. So we've had to come up with a new approach. Related to Milton Road, we know that Milton Road is a major approach road into the city. It's a significant road, it's an important road. The proposal is to plant both sides of the road with trees forming an avenue where possible, thereby safeguarding the current avenue character of the road. The traditional approach is to create a uniform avenue, single kind of tree at regular spacings, e.g. Victoria Avenue with that lovely avenue of horses. The contemporary approach is to get as much diversity into the tree cover as possible, thereby lessening the risk of wholesale failure, tree failure. So we want to get as much diversity into the trees along Milton Road, thereby improving the resilience of the tree population. We want to strike a balance between diversity, and continuity along the road. We don't think it's the right approach to dot the different types of trees everywhere. We would like to create some sort of continuity. And we've done that by identifying logical points along the length of the road where the character of the road changes, and therefore it would be logical to change the genus and or the species. Therefore, you would get stretches of the road with the same types of trees in them. We can further get more diversity in those stretches by choosing different cultivars of the same species with similar form, height and other attributes. And of course we have to take into consideration we'd like to use species that are tried and tested to lessen further the risk of plant failure. We would like to get large genus of trees in where possible, and we would like to use narrow crowned forms only where necessary. So that would be where the property setbacks are less than where the highway or the road is more narrow. And of course we'd like positive arboricultural characteristics, easy to prune, no basal suckers, no excessive fruit, no recognised pest and disease issues, no structural issues and no subsidence risk. To go back to character, we've identified, and I think you probably agree with this, there's a fundamental change in the character of the road at its junction with Barby Road. It becomes much narrower to the south of Barby Road, narrowing down to its narrowest at Milton's corner. But to the north of Barby Road, it's much more generous, the buildings are set further back, and it has a more spacious feel about it. So that's our obvious break point. So we went on this narrower, wider issue and thought, what trees can we do, what trees can we plant in each of those character areas? We could get broader crowns to the north, but we will have to use narrow upright branches, ascending branches to the south. Otherwise we'll get problems, as Kenny pointed out earlier, with high-sided vehicles just trashing the side of the trees.
It's usually bin lorries.
Yeah. This is an odd slide. I didn't know where to quite put it, but this was just to confirm the size of semi-mature trees. That they are 4 to 5 metres on planting, and you can get a good idea about how high they are by the chap standing beside one there.
If I can just add, that tends to be right across the city, what the kind of size of tree I plant each year. So they're not little whips that we're sticking in the ground. The reason why we use that sort of size of tree is to reduce vandalism. It's quite hard to actually snap those when you're half cut coming out of a pub in the evening. And also we use the higher stakes, so that actually it's quite a lot of effort for people to, if they're going to do that kind of thing, snap them out. So yeah, also the other reason is if we use too small a tree, people trip over them, or the mower men mow over them.
Okay, so having considered all the practical issues, we're left with more aesthetic ones to choose from. But this basic division of whether it's going to be a narrow-crowned tree to the south of Arbury Road and broad-crowned tree, we've created a palette, which is what we'll be giving to you later. Palette of trees. Some are narrow, some are broad. So the choice, if you like, would be the narrow to the south of Arbury Road and the broader to the north. Okay, so just to run through quickly, have I got enough time?
Yeah, I think we do.
Yeah, okay. So the narrow, okay. So this is Erman's birch. It gets to 12 to 17 metres tall. It's pyramidal, therefore it will stay in shape. It shouldn't get all the bashing from high-sided vehicles. It's got a lovely autumn yellow colour, and the bark is white and flaking and very attractive. This is Chinese birch, columnar in form, yellowy leaves, but it's got a very stunning orange-brown flaking bark. Himalayan birch is a particularly distinct white bark. That would look very, very good in places like Woodhead Drive, near the yew tree, so you've got some contrast. It has a nice round canopy, and it stays that shape, which is rather useful actually. Going on, Prunus schmidtii, flowering cherry, gets to about 15 to 20 metres, maintains its oval shape, has a lovely polished red-brown bark, autumn leaves, and a pink-white flower in the spring. An ornamental pear, a very white flower in the spring, and lovely red russet colours of leaf colour in the autumn. It's a good shape, maintains its shape, and it hangs onto its leaves, I think, quite well.
Yeah, it does, yeah. The other thing as well is the pears are absolutely tiny, and it fruits very seldomly.
So that it doesn't create a nuisance for the painters. Grey alder, it's a really pretty tree, this. Bright green foliage yellowing in the autumn, but it has lovely pink yellow catkins in early spring, and a lovely bright green leaf in spring. Moving on to the broad-crowned trees for zone 2, palette contains Liriodendron, which is a tulip tree, which gets rather big, but it does have a very distinctive leaf shape and a very large and distinctive yellow green flower, and it's fragrant. Tilia cordata winter orange, lovely neat form of lime, has a very distinct and very pretty orangey brown bark, especially in the spring. It has profuse flowers. You don't often notice lime flowers, but you will notice when you walk underneath it because it's very fragrant, and a lovely yellow colour in the autumn. Tilia tomentosa is a silver lime. This is a much bigger leaf. It has a very white underneath, so when it waves in the wind you get this green-white effect, rather like a linden tree. Clusters of small flowers, again fragrant.
Also, with that tomentosa, in extreme heats, the leaves literally turn upside down, so they don't transpirate, which is what trees do. When they get hot, they try and release lots of air and water. But this actually really tolerates those reflective heats of the tarmac.
Okay, and moving on, this is the American lime. Pyramidal, quite large, largely brighter on the side, yellow in the autumn. Again, clustered yellow flowers and fragrant. Okay.
Thank you very much. So, what we'd like to do then, as part of the first task, is have that run through. Kind of, I appreciate there's been a lot of information there, trying to give you kind of a background to what Dinah and Kenny have already really thought about in terms of what we can put in place, how the trees can be healthy along Milton Road, and identify a palette of trees to go forward with, which we'd like your then input on in terms of which ones there's a preference going forward. So we talked about there's this element of a narrow and wider, that's both in terms of the road and also where the buildings are set. So as Dinah said, as we go south towards the city from Arby Road, we're getting narrower, and we aim to consider trees that haven't got such a big crown. When we get into the wider section of the road, so north of Arby Road, then we can have these larger trees that are going to get larger, and also the larger crowns as part of that, because they have more room to accommodate. So what we're going to do is put onto your tables in a moment summary sheets of the narrow tree selection and the broad tree selection. That is effectively a copy of those slides. They're A1 size, they're nice and large. And what we'd like to do as a group is to, first of all, look at the narrow tree selection, talk around those amongst yourselves, and from those 6, as a group, select your 3 top preferences. So of the 6, which are your top 3? And then for the broader selection, we've got a section of 4 that have gone here, and again, we'd like your preference of your top 2 of that 4. The selection, obviously, I hope you appreciate, that's gone through, is there's been a lot of trees that have been considered by Kenny, Dinah and their teams and to get to this selection. So a lot of work's already occurred to get to this point, but we want to make sure that as part of this, you get part of the selection as well in terms of going forward, and you get to ask the guys questions as we go. So in summary, what we'd like to do for the next 20 minutes as a group, we'd like to come back in 20 minutes and feedback in terms of your top 3 for the narrow section and your top 2 for the broad section. The officers will be walking around, so if you have any questions, feel free to either catch Kenny, Dinah, Liv and myself, and we'll try our best to answer the questions that you have available. Thank you. What we'll do is we'll just go around to the table and just ask your facilitator to just quickly feedback on the selections that we've made. And then we'll lead into task 2, which Kieran Perkins will give a brief presentation on, just to kind of set the scene for you, before we then move into that task for the second half of the session. So we'll start with table 1.
That's fine. So we had a lot of debate about the selection, and really kindly answered some of the questions that we had. And we had some debate about the height in terms of the height at which the tree would go in. And there was quite a bit of feeling that the choice, was not exactly what they would have wanted. So selection was brought into question quite a bit. But when we got to the end, we got some positive choices on the Himalayan birch, the flowering cherry, but with some questions on when it would flower, which was an important point. The ornamental pear and adding in the hornbeam as a possible option there. So that was the narrow section. The wider section, then we didn't choose any of these. Here. So we had an addition of a pollarded London plane, which all of our attendees liked, and a tree, one of choice, that needed to flower. Didn't have to be a specific type, but needed to flower.
Kenny, can you just answer when do these flowering cherries flower?
So, no, I didn't actually know. Do you know, what time of year the cherries flower? It's spring. Yeah,
okay. Thank you guys. Table number 2, who hopefully starts maybe more to the...
The concern was, one of the choosing choices is how they'll be laid out in context and how they'll be landscaped into the road so that it look correct. And so the 3 trees that we've chosen, the ornamental pear, flowering cherry, is continuity with the existing cherries. And then stuck between Chinese birch and the Himalayan birch, because the Himalayan birch has got a wider, bigger crown, but the Chinese birch has nice coloured, the distress bark, so there's split there between the full crown of the Himalayan birch and the all year round interesting bark.
yeah.
So that was the decision between those. So it's a tie between Chinese and a distinct flowering cherry on the pear. And then for the wider section, main concern was that in the spring, none of them have very prominent flowers. So they will flower, but it won't be as noticeable as a cherry tree or something like that. But they've chosen based on their height and foliage in the spring right through the decals in the autumn to give all year round interest.
Was it to ensure that there was something that wasn't aligned?
Yeah,
So it wasn't all aligned.
that's right. So the tulip tree was chosen so to counteract the fact that it's having out of blind trees.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just on the big canopy trees, we're caught between a rock and a hard place because there's so many issues with the bigger trees right across the board. And yeah, that's kind of how we ended up. And unfortunately as well, the big trees don't seem to have pretty flowers bar the Leodendron. But I understand, I mean, the flowers are obviously a winner, aren't they? A public winner, because you get a fantastic show at the centre of the year. But also don't forget autumn. This time for me is the best time. And if you start driving around now, some of the lime trees are looking absolutely epic. I think we're going to get a good year this year for autumn colours.
Can you tell us where we could go in Cambridge and see all
Can we just get the other feedback and then
I'll have to come over a bit.
That's all right. Just so we can try and keep on track for timing. Right.
So we had quite a lot of debate about the first 6. One of the suggestions that we have here is a lot more and followed by the great alder, and then by the flowering cherry. Wasn't sort of so much enthusiasm for any of the birch trees. And he also suggested a walking path.
Oh yes, that's good.
And then in the second fall, the tulip was definitely the preference. And they found it very difficult to choose between 3 lime trees. Couldn't really make a choice between the 3, couldn't see big differences. And also were slightly disappointed that there wasn't anything with more flowers and blossom. So we've got the American vine, but it's really a hugely unanimous decision.
So, we chose the Chinese birch, the ornamental pear and the grey alder. Our main discussion was around the underplanting, that was our secondary concern. Actually, would it be a tree grill or would it be planting or grass and maintenance of that? And then for task B, we chose between the tulip tree and the silver lime.
Thank you very much. I think there's just one question asking where you could see, was it birch trees in Cambridge?
No, was it lime trees or
Lime trees.
Lime trees. Just basically take a look at, especially around this area, around the arbory. There's loads of things happening as you drive around.
Right, if we could...
Parker's piece.
Yeah, quite big ones, massive. You can drink your tea out of them. Like I said, that's the exception to the rule of big carrot.
There is a picture of it.
They also, I mean, I know they're not showy like cherry trees, but I'm a tree enthusiast. When you look up at lime trees in the spring and you see their flowers, they are quite spectacular. Some of them smell absolutely amazing. Bees love them. So yeah, just because they're not what you would perceive to be your petals and flower, bright whites or bright pinks, or, you know, do take a look.
Is the north side of Parker's piece, are those lime trees, those huge ones?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Right, if we could move into task 2, guys, just because I don't want to keep you too late. Right, so on this next section, we can do the lights again, Andrew or Chris. Andrew? You do the lights, please, thank you. So Kieran will talk you through task 2 and maybe 2 minute lights.
Okay, so the second half, task 2. Obviously, the last half, and most of the discussions over the last year and a half, 2 years, whatever it's been, Milton Road is sort of continuity of the whole avenue from one end to the other. Now, there's another important side to Milton Road, I think, especially for you as local residents, which is the very kind of local moments that we've termed landmark landscapes, for the sort of want of better name. Any suggestions very gladly received. And we've identified these 4 areas up the road, each of which feel like they're sort of particularly significant as places for local residents, that are also places where there's a bit more space away from the highway in which one might do something. So those 4 places are outside the library at the junction with Ashton Road, the parade shops a bit further down Milton Road, the junction of Woodhead Drive with the big poplars, where there's quite a lot of space, all of which isn't necessary for most vehicles. And then the 4th one being the Golden Highway junction. Now they've all got kind of, you know, they've either got public uses like the library or shops, places to meet, or Woodhead being a bit of a gateway to the communities to the north. So 4 places that we thought were particularly significant and where there's opportunity to do something more in terms of the landscape. Now, what we'll hand out in a moment is these 4 plans. We produced these simplified plans of each of those 4 areas. The buildings are black, we've indicated where particular shops are, the trees, the current trees are drawn on, to help us just kind of get a feel for the space that's available. And we've deliberately not shown either the current road layout or the concept design, because we know that that's going to evolve. And the whole point of this is that we look at it, if you like, from the other end of the telescope. We think about sort of what the brief might be for each of these 4 places, as places to be experienced on the ground as a sort of human being, not as a bus or even as a cyclist kind of passing through. So what we're planning to do, what we're planning to do is go through a series of questions with your facilitators on each table. We've got about 20 minutes I think for this exercise as well. There's quite a lot to get through, so it's going to be quite high-paced, and in a similar way to the way we've just done, we'd like to feedback after the question. There'll be one location per table, and they've been randomly allocated, I think. And I guess because they are not necessarily sort of your patch, I think it's important that when you're thinking about what for each of these places is, you try and think about everyone's needs, not just your own needs and desires. Obviously, get those down as well if you can, but also think about what people at large might want and need from these places. Now, in terms of trees, because these are away from the highway, we've got a lot more freedom than we would have otherwise. So you're free to choose from either of the two palettes that you've already been given. There's also an additional one with a bit more, freedom. So one of the questions concerns what trees you might like to see in those places, what things appropriate for each of those places. And then there's just a handful of slides here just to kind of get some ideas flowing, I suppose, about, should this be a place to meet? Each of these locations should be a place to meet. Obviously, there's different ways in which that might happen. Either through making sure that there's street furniture that supports that, as in the image on the left, or possibly through temporary installations like the right, should it be a place of kind of repose, a place of quietude away from the hustle and bustle of the road and of the busier places? Just some examples. Is identity important? So are there opportunities for communities to make this that sort of moment where they say, look, here we are, this is the entrance to what happens. So the example in the middle you may know is the sign at the edge of Are there spaces to play? Now, clearly there's kind of constraints on that, but there may be places which are away from the road or where playable space can be invoked, so not necessarily a playground. I don't think that's part of the brief. You may disagree. But nonetheless, there may be places that are joyful and can encourage play, whether that's for 4-year-olds or 16-year-olds. A whole lot of different things you might do in terms of hard surfaces, from quite conventional at the top, something a bit kind of, that's a real photo, an aerial photo of a real bit street, something a bit bolder. Different sorts of seating, the ordinary sort of park bench isn't all that's available. Sort of selection of different ways in which seating can be. Are there opportunities for spectacle? So you're perhaps aware of the meadow planting that the City Council is experimenting with around the city. Are there opportunities for something like that? Are there opportunities because we are constrained, because we're away from the road, or really full of experience in, say, spring and also just to acknowledge that there's a whole spectrum of different ways that you can grow from, in hard landscape, in pots or planters, right through to much more informal landscapes like the ones at the bottom, as a community orchard, and a garden on the bottom neck, which is close by one of the other colours in the streets. Think about what it might be at night. Now, actually, many places in the public realm, they may be better not to be lit. So if there are places where we don't want people hanging around at night, it might be better for them to be dark. But if it is a place that's going to be lit up, think about what that might be. And some other considerations. So in the background of all of this, I guess there's all the practical considerations, which you probably don't have to worry about too much in terms of this session, but it's just to sort of acknowledge that will go into this. So, I've sort of already covered this, but you've each been allocated a landmark area, and are we clear? Do the tables know which number they are?
Yeah, we know which number they are. So
yeah. Okay. So you'll get your stuff in a minute. And we're asking you to, as I say, help us develop a brief. So So ideas and thoughts about what might happen there. We're not really looking for design solutions because that's the designer's job in due course. But this is your opportunity to sort of get down on paper with your facilitators some thoughts about what might happen in each of these places. At the end of 20 minutes, we're going to get the lights up now. Good. At the end of 20 minutes, we're going to feedback in the same way as before, and there's also hopefully enough time at the end of that for contributions from other tables as well. So if you just one more thing, I suppose if you can come to a sort of consensus view on your table, that's great. But if you can't, as long as you're clear about where the sort of differences of opinion come, that's also quite helpful to the design in terms of knowing where the conflict is.
So starting with table one, they'll talk through their ideas, and then we'll have a short couple of minutes if people have got any pressing ideas of their own for that particular location or generate, and then we'll just have a couple of ideas from people on the floor, and then we'll move on to the next area. And that way we'll try and not delay you from leaving too late. We are going to run on a little bit later. But starting with table one then, Steve.
Right, thanks. So, I think the first thing to bring to everyone's attention is it wasn't necessarily the group's first choice for doing something as an area. Well, the area is that sort of right, we're talking about the library area. Thank you. Right, so it wasn't necessarily the first choice, thank you, Richard. But we I think, warmed to the theme, and I think there was a growing set of ideas as the theme developed. But there's nothing wrong with any of the ideas, any idea is worth thinking about. So the name that seemed to strike was Library Corner, is the name we came up with. And the feeling that there was a community centre area being developed there, and that it was perhaps potential for a community space. Opportunities were to have trees on both sides, preferably light rather than dark, but obviously with various discussion about bus lane plan and those sort of things. Lighter surfaces to differentiate the area, so to make it themed, link it all together, possibly painted green, possibly linked to a reading theme. So some of the ideas that came out were bench seats that looked like books, bins that had books painted on them, so that it was very much themed as the library area. We also talked about possibly developing the community area to have landscaping, trees, seating, and to put in some lighting, especially for safety purposes, but also to give it a feel. So there was talk about developing the 1930s theme, developing a more retro theme, perhaps having some downlighters, some LEDs we talked about, but making it an interesting area. Sculpture came out towards the end, some debates about having a fountain at one point, but with difficulties of keeping that up to date and keeping children's things out of it was discussed. But really trying to create some space around this area. Some of it couldn't be changed because obviously some of it's owned by the Catholic Church. But perhaps opportunities to change some of the seating, change some of the areas to develop this feeling of space to the library thing. In terms of issues, relationships with the church and highways would obviously be key. Safety very important throughout all of this, and it needs to be clear where you can cycle with some of the things that came out. There was more than this, but we just chose a few things. What sort of place is it? After school, community area, and possibly a retro area, and obviously a church space as well. And in terms of trees and planting, a lot of the discussion really was about trying to create a bit of an avenue, the opposite side of the church as being somewhere where trees could potentially be planted. And then very mixed views about main preferences. Existing limes were quite popular with some, and then we had I think it's the Magnolia Galaxies, is it, and the tulip tree that were mentioned as possibles out of the landmark tree selection. And other elements that should be there, widen the Chesterton Hall Crescent space, which has got a tree in it potentially, create some seating there, and possibly replant a tree when it's ready to be replanted, I think is what we talked about. And I think that's probably the top level. Anything I've missed, gentlemen? Do you want to tackle questions on that at the end?
Yeah, let's maybe come around at the end. If we go through each table and then we'll come out to any.
Yeah, so we haven't arrived in the end for the parade where the shops are. The opportunities for that area, we've got is organised parking. We think that's essential to make parking more rational. Soften the landscape, it's just a very pointed area right now. Continuity with Highworth Avenue, which is just the next avenue along. Seating for people who do shops, planting possibly raised beds to show where you can park and which pedestrian areas rather than just have one mass parking area, and bicycle racks to people to be able to cycle there. Issues we might encounter would be compulsory purchase of land might be necessary because a lot of it depends on shopkeeper cooperation in terms of providing enough parking, providing the things like raised beds, trees, etc. Change the character to be able to be pedestrian. Sorry, change character to encourage pedestrian footfall, so to encourage more people to actually walk there in the shop rather than just pulling in the car and then move on. So help with the developments. The feel of it, ideally, would be like a small, a small square with continental fields with. So it'd be a small square with continental fields with trees and sitting areas with cars parked, around as well. Similar to you get in France the trees of choice would be the Magnolia corpus and sweet gum. Generally don't want to have just one variety. Their trees as the choice, depending on whether the experts think that would thrive. And then the final bit is elements that would be there. We like the idea of mosaic curving similar to that in Eddington. No bark or shingle or loose curving. So that's
Thank you very much. Table number 3, please.
Which area?
There's more about that later on. Have to invite a local school to get the children to test the name and to come up with ideas for this, because we felt it was particularly important to conclusion in the area. Opportunities. To claim it back and to make it more open, thin it all out, and again reach out to children, give them opportunities to play and pick fruit. We thought that was really important. And we can plant more grass because the junction apparently is going to be narrowing, so that will give an opportunity to have even more space. Issues, it's currently very dense, and people can get up to absolutely anything in there, and apparently they do, thanks to drugs and and because it's very, you need to retain the wildlife that it already has. So it's important to keep an element of what we've already got so that we can do that. Can we unpadlock the gates at the moment then?
We'll pull it out. You get a shot of it.
Yeah. Load the path, please. Because apparently that hasn't been done for years. What's up the place? Again, for more open, bring the height down, fill it out, and make it into a community space with benches for parents and children, so they can sit there while their children play. And again, we put in here try to sort of other ideas because that's really important for their space as well. Tree planting ideas. Magnolia Galaxy was our favourite, but not in the area that we're talking about, but on the other side of the road. That would look really good. And flowering cherry. We've also come up with some other planting ideas. Fruit trees, hence the picking fruit idea. There was an apple tree and a green gate tree, which is very Cambridge. and then it was felt that we should move the brambles at the front because they're a mess, and maybe replace them with japonica mixed in with Japanese bitter orange, which has a very long Latin name. The poplars are light because they're landmarks, so maybe we can keep some of those, and also plant some hazel trees, but keep yew trees. Other elements, a place to sit, as we said earlier, very important to encourage wildlife, which we feel would be achieved by doing some of this planting here. Opportunities to walk through it and make it a good space for birds. And that's it.
Thank you very much. And table number 4.
Okay, so we have the Golden Pine Junction area. So we start with the current name, or with what could be called the Milton Road Gate as a proposed alternative. In terms of opportunities, it could be more of a hub, so more of a community space, more defined by the residents there. So different road surfacings, more trees, more green spaces, more of a welcome to Cambridge as well, to kind of build awareness of the cycling heritage through things like public art. And try and break up the space with like a roundabout or a tree in the middle of the junction to kind of show that it's not a traffic thoroughfare, it's actually a community hub. And then sort of spaces for play vests and a pop-up cafe as well. At the moment, the kind of issues that the area faces is around, it's quite a fragmented space, so it's hard to navigate as a non-road user, to trying to align everything so actually people can navigate the space more easily. And then sort of underneath all that is safety. So what sort of place could it be? So more of a community hub, pop-up cafe, play and rest areas, green spaces. I mean, a really strong point that we have is actually people shouldn't feel that they're just driving down the road. It should be a space for people to actually appreciate the whole ecosystem around it of sort of our residents. In terms of trees, we kind of had 3 preferences for different areas. So a tulip tree for a big distinct feature, magnolia trees for the outer edges, and then ornamental pear for more kind of avenue look to the area as well. And the planting is just there to kind of reinforce the community space and kind of make a statement and make it more welcoming and less harsh as well. And in terms of other elements that should be considered, it's kind of a high traffic area, there's a lot of transient traffic, so actually how do you take those people, how do you make it easy for them to navigate in a safe way, and make it distinct they need to kind of go through that.
How do you make people aware that it's going into a residential area?
Yeah. Any other plans? Oh, and then using kind of our barriers and meadow flowers to distinguish between road users and non-road users to increase safety as well.
Road surface.
Yeah, so road surfaces to distinguish between it being a traffic area and a visitor area as well.
Thanks, Carl.
Great. So I think that's, unless there's any other elements, I appreciate we're slightly over time, but if there's any other ideas, thoughts on any of these areas, if you want to say them, suggest them now. Otherwise, if you need to get going, I appreciate we're over time, but...
There are 4 separate areas, that's great, but there could be a theme that went through the whole 4 of them that goes together, because it is all a set of 4, really, isn't it?
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, it's good for everyone.
About children being involved is really important. We look at where the age people move.
Yeah.
Cases for the future, so I think we should really think about how that's rolled out in some ways to make sure we get that feedback across the whole thing.
And that is and that's what we've got to get right, because if we're encouraging children to be near a road, we've got to make sure that safety is there as well. So. Children's input, well, we'll be liaising with the school. Paul's already visited the school and had a chat with the teachers there and understanding. You've been to... No, but you've got to pick. So we've got engagement with the school.
Milton Road.
Right, so that's
Milton Road Primary.
No, I know that's not, but we are in terms of how we're going to engage, we'll engage with the schools is probably the best way to do it in terms of getting input from that point.
No, that was,
No, that's fine.
that was about a particular issue, Ashton Road. It wasn't about any of
It's just to indicate that we are already talking with the schools, and that seems to be the best way to get feedback in that area. Any other questions? Yeah.
I really think you need to make sure that everybody knows directly they come near the Golden Hind that it isn't a corridor, it is a residential area, and I think you've actually got to make that very aware by putting lots of trees and other things there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major intersection of two roads, so we have to accommodate with that, but we're pulling the junction in as part of the design anyway, and that gives more space for green space, so we can accommodate, and it gives quite a lot of...
I think the traffic needs to know that they need to kind of slow down, the cyclists around.
Sure.
There's lots of people.
So Milton Road is probably a really good example of where that works. So you've got Petersfield and Donkey Common, and then you've got Kelsey Carriage, Mill Road, Lensfield, and the trees that sit above that will really calm that whole area.
Yeah.
Imagine if you took those trees away, you'd probably have that junction that you've currently got, the Golden Hind Pub. And I think that is, you're absolutely right, that is an area that does need softening.
Yeah.
And we've got the space to plant bigger trees in that area, hence the kind of opening of that other landscape tree selection.
And we did have one right in the middle of the Golden Hind Junction, because directly you do that, you're not only seeing that as you come down the road, but you actually realise that there is something different happening.
That's probably the only bit I can't accommodate. I can't put a tree in the middle of the junction, I'm afraid, just because we're going for a signalised junction, and that's what's being agreed for that section. But other than those in the corners, we can certainly accommodate much bigger trees.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get the canopy of trees and heat, that whole junction, that'd be a dream come true. I mean, obviously, I understand we're not going to be in our lifetime, but if we all have the foresight, do it now. But I mean, it isn't funny though, is it? You know, look what we've got from Victoria. You know, if we think far enough forward, one of our plant trees has got a 100-year vision, and that's what we've got to do.
But silver birches only live 50 years, don't they?
No, 80.
Oh, okay. But Gilbert Road, they're all dead after 70.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically, you know, we're trying to look at the longevity.
Oh, the thing I'd like to ask is how fixed are the choice of trees that we've been presented with? Because I think, personally, I don't really like many of the trees. I prefer to have hornbeams or oaks, as you know. And then there's London planes. There's lots of different types of trees. Is it basically all decided that the cherry trees and things are the only ones, or is it genuinely?
If there's ideas that are put to the table, well, I'll definitely look at them. I'm not actually saying no to hornbeams. I think we tragically had to let 2 of them go on private land just by the library because it was causing subsidence, and they were fantastic specimens. The street tree planting is very different from the planting that we've got in these small spaces or open spaces. And what we want to do is make sure that I'm not doing what I did you know, in 2008 and 2009, planting a tree that just won't go to its full succession, or a bunch of trees that won't reach their full potential. That's all I'm worried about. I think hornbeam and oaks are fantastic. I think once upon a time, many years ago, there was an idea to plant Quercus frenata down Milton Road, which get absolutely massive. I thought it was a great idea, but
because those tiny cherry trees, they get lost in Milton Road. It's a big wide road. It's an avenue, 2-1 avenue. A real sense of achievement that you're coming to a great city, and at the moment you've got a few pockmarked lollipops that are...
So I can already see there's difference in opinion on your table, I think I'm guessing. So there's obviously going to be different opinion. I think, okay, so we're trying to accommodate, we've given you a selection that we've obviously these guys put a lot of work into getting to. Other ones that have been suggested may be able to be accommodated in these landscape areas, but we're trying to put forward stuff. We don't want to waste your time putting opportunities for you to make selections, and then obviously then we disregard all of that. The idea of these workshops is to give you selections you can give us feedback and then we go forward with. So that's the key element, but ones that have been suggested will be looked at, and possibly those can go in some of the landscape areas, but I know on street trees what we've provided you is what we're looking at going forward.
We've talked about trees, understandably, but hopefully there'll be more planting, like low-level planting, bushes, roses, whatever.
And we haven't talked about any of that, unfortunately.
No,
That's the sort of stuff that makes it more of a residential community area, the sort of bits and bobs around the trees.
Sure.
And wildflowers, like we've been experimenting with in Cambridge.
Yeah.
I mean, an avenue of wildflowers down Milton Road would be great, I know, maybe.
What we're looking for at the moment is key elements that are going to affect the design, and trees, the type of tree, the location, how we accommodate the planting is a big factor of that. Some of the lower level planting is far more adaptable, and we can have those discussions as we get to the detailed design stage. It's these elements that we need to kind of get your input on now to inform our next stage of the design, which is why we're talking about that now.
Incidentally, is there any in the design, is there anything about a medial line of trees that you could have?
There's no, there will not be a medial strip in,
wasn't it?
I mean, you can look at the final concept is on the web, have a look at that, that's the basis in which we're going forward with.
Because that would free up all of these spaces to the edge.
It's
So
that
taking
you,
the character in your
yeah.
properties in that regard.
So you're moving the
Okay,
character.
no,
Or is not designed.
Yeah,
That's okay.
that would not.
No, it's fair enough.
Last
Just
question.
one, can I ask that consideration be given to the avenue not having to be balanced? The one side where you've got plenty of space for a crown and one place where you haven't. I don't think you need necessarily to have the same sort of tree on both sides of the road at the same level.
You prefer to
I
see a
don't
bit?
prefer it, but if you can't do it, it's better than not having trees at all. You may need a tall, thin tree on one side and a few
Yeah,
on the other.
possibly.
That's the point.
Yes, fine. I think that's certainly something that can be considered. It's a different thing, but I think even between opposites, that's a visual thing rather than to some extent as well as a design thing. So yes.
Well, there's one thing that was all the groups actually noticed was the desire for more seating, public seating.
Okay. No. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much, guys, for your time. I hope you found it useful. I hope you've thought it's been a constructive, useful time. So we really appreciate it. And thank you for giving us a couple of hours this afternoon, this evening even, to help us progress the design further. Thank you.
So the workshop event is finished. I don't see any reason why the presentations given by City Council officers couldn't have been given in public, or even why the public couldn't have been invited to sit at the back of the room tonight and watch the presentation. I was pretty unimpressed by the examples the tree officers gave of what they thought were good civic tree planting next to roads in Cambridge. They seem to think that sort of the silver birches that we've got in areas of Arbury are great positive examples. People, I hope people, certainly around my table there at the discussions, were keen on, for example, London Plains, pollarded London Plains, bigger, more striking trees.
Couldn't resist that, sorry, Richard.
It's all right, that's where I'll stop the video, Councillor Manning. Have you got...
What did you think of that meeting? Chips?
Chips? How have you managed to get yourself chips? Because you just... from this area? You're eating cold chips?
No, they're still quite warm.
How have you kept chips warm for 2 hours?